If ignorance itself had a television show, its name would be The View. This is a show that holds discussions on important and controversial issues, such as did evolution happen, and is the Earth flat? Critical thinking has taken a permanent vacation from The View. Its hosts are, at best, poorly informed, at worst, functionally retarded. The intellectual value of The View falls somewhere between Jackass and Jerry Springer, and honestly, I'd rather watch idiots hurting each other instead of idiots hurting America, because that's what The View is doing. It's on broadcast television every weekday morning right after Oprah. People actually watch this travesty. People are exposed to all sorts of misinformation presented on The View. People form their opinions based on this misinformation. People act on their opinions, and people vote. So, while I really don't want to give The View any more attention than it deserves, which I would place at none whatsoever, this really cannot go unaddressed. On December 12th, The View held a discussion regarding President Bush's statement that the Bible is not literally true, and believing that God created the world is compatible with acknowledging the reality of evolution. So, right away, we've got politics, religion, and science. It's like rock, paper, scissors. You can just tell that this is going to be so monumentally stupid. And right away, we've got Elizabeth Hasselbeck, who is famous for being a contestant on Survivor, making the argument that when she sees a really nice purse or a pair of shoes, she wonders who designed it, and therefore humans must also have been designed by a designer. Wow. First off, what about the inverse of this purse observation? If you're the kind of person who, when you see complexity, you think there's a designer behind it, then what if it wasn't a really nice purse? How ugly would a purse have to be for you to look at it and say, okay, there is absolutely no way that this purse was created by any kind of intelligent being? Would it have to be a pile of leather scraps, mangled latches, and half of a zipper? Well, then you wouldn't even be looking at a purse. There really is no inverse of the really nice purse observation, because people who are intent on looking for a designer behind everything are going to find it. Logic and evidence are not going to deter them. But the fact that someone like Elizabeth Hasselbeck finds it difficult to believe that human life could come into existence without being created by a designer says nothing about whether or not this is actually true. Your personal disbelief has no bearing on the truth of the matter. Most importantly, if you assume that complexity requires a designer, then how do you explain the complexity of the designer itself? Was there another designer behind this designer, and another designer behind that one, and so on to infinity? This explains absolutely nothing about the origin of anything. Some people realize this, so they make an exception for the designer, which they often call God. They say that God did not require a designer. But if you're going to say that something as apparently complex as God does not require a designer, then why does any kind of complexity require a designer? Why would humans need a designer? This also explains nothing, and this argument based upon apparent design is ultimately fruitless. Next, Elizabeth says that looking at Michelangelo's David, for example, you wouldn't expect that it simply popped into existence in its current form out of nowhere. I am just amazed that she's able to come up with something like that and find it unbelievable, but she apparently has no objection to the idea of God making humans immediately just pop into existence out of dirt. What's the difference here? Why wouldn't she find that unbelievable? I sure do. Later, Elizabeth brings up the fine-tuned universe argument, which essentially states that the basic physical properties of the world and the universe are just right to allow the existence of human beings, and if any of them were even slightly off, we would not be able to exist. The implication is that some intelligence precisely adjusted our universe and our world to allow us to exist. This strikes me as one of the most inane arguments ever. I mean, the universe allows us to exist? How long did it take them to figure that one out? Because, here we are. And what if these physical properties were just slightly off? Well, then we wouldn't exist, and therefore we would not be able to make the observation that the universe is perfectly suited to allow our existence. I really think this argument originates from a very human-centered view of the universe. There seems to be this assumption that humans are so important that the universe itself must be tweaked to enable our survival. But we are not that important. We are not so important that we absolutely must exist. It just so happens that we do. We could have easily never existed to begin with. There is nothing inherently special about our existence. Now, imagine a universe with physical properties so different that there's no way humans could exist. Instead, what does exist is a completely bizarre form of life that we can't even imagine. And if this life form is intelligent, then couldn't it just as easily observe that its universe seems to be just right to allow its survival? Does this mean there was some designer that said, okay, in this universe it will be impossible for humans to exist? The fine-tuned universe argument really proves nothing but how self-centered some people are. Now, I don't mean to focus entirely on Elizabeth here, it's just that she says a lot of things that are wrong. But Whoopi Goldberg also expressed a position that seemed similar to deism. That is, a god of some sort created the initial conditions and natural laws of the universe, then set it into motion and just stepped back, and does not intervene in our universe. This is intended to make the idea of God compatible with our scientific observations of the natural world. And I would say it does so successfully, even though there is still no compelling reason to posit the existence of any gods. And redefining God to accommodate science is very much preferable to redefining science to try and accommodate God. But it seems like this is motivated by a conflict that I view as unnecessary. These people find themselves unable to reject science, which is wonderful, but at the same time they feel the need to hold on to some idea of God. For whatever reason, they can't let go of that concept. They still want something to call God, even if they have to redefine God until it's barely even there. And I just want to tell these people, it's okay if you don't believe in God. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to believe in God, and you don't have to be confronted with this conflict between God and science. I know there are reasonable people who acknowledge and appreciate science, and they should consider that maybe they don't need God. Maybe they can live without God. I think they could. So to all you deists out there, or other people who are close to letting go of the concept of God, I believe in you.